So then thinking about your experience and reflecting on how the pieces of advice that you might give someone going through something similar, starting with, if you, a lot of what you've spoken about is how you supported your mum. If someone's parent, dies or has died, and part of their role is also supporting their parent, what sort of advice do you have for someone there?
I think it's hard. I think I have found it difficult at times. I'm torn between I want to be there for her. She's my only parent. She's my priority. And then also sometimes getting really annoyed at her. Sorry, mum. When there's things that like my dad would have done. Like he was very much the tech person, finances, DIY, all of that. And so I'm kind of had to step into that. And it will like really frustrate me when my mum like can't do something with her phone or whatever. So I'm just like, you should know how to do this. It's like basic, but she doesn't. And I think it's that, your relationship with the surviving parent, like it will change. I mean, I guess I'm lucky in that we never had a difficult relationship. We always got on well. We were always close, but I do feel like it has changed. I definitely feel a level of like responsibility and guilt. I always had a bit of only child guilt of like, oh, what if I
What
want
does
to?
that mean? Both the guilt and the only child guilt?
I think the, if I wanted to move to Australia, say, I always felt bad of like, I'd be leaving them. Like they haven't got any other kids. Like what if, at the moment they're, well, I don't know. So he was 57 and my mom was 59. But like, obviously as they get older, like I'm going to be the only one. And I think I'd seen, my granny was sort of quite elderly and frail for many years. And, seeing my dad and his sister kind of share the burden of that and kind of thinking, okay, I haven't got anyone else. Like it's going to fall on me. And that's just been magnified by like sorting everything with my mum, my dad, like all the admin, funeral, knowing that, oh God, I'm going to be doing this on my own one day.
That's tough.
And yeah, and that like if I was to go, like say, move to Australia, like I just couldn't do that. I couldn't leave her on her own. So I feel like it kind of changes maybe things that I would have seen for myself in my life. Yeah, whereas I don't know, maybe still feel the same if you have siblings. Like, I don't know, you tell me. I can only speak from not having siblings, but I think there definitely is that like, it's only me.
That's really interesting. That is really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have three siblings, and I do.
Greedy.
Yeah, exactly. And I do very viscerally feel that sense of like there being this other teammates out
Yeah.
there. So yeah, I really empathize with the feeling that you have, and it makes sense. Makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. And I think there's no easy, like, I think I made the decision to move back to London. Sort of, I think I was at hers for maybe about 2 months because she wanted me to. She was like, I don't want you to stay here. Like, you love living in London. And I think it was the best thing because I think it was important that we had time apart to kind of deal with our own grief because it's hard. Like, it's good to be together. And there has been times where I'm like, I'm just going to come and stay. Like, if when something bad's happened, like, we're just like, we need to be together. But I think it's also been important for me to kind of have that space and to have that like normal life aside from that.
That's really interesting, and that's maybe something which isn't immediately obvious from the outside when you're thinking about people grieving.
Yeah. And like, it's hard. I think there's been, I part of me is like, it's great, having times with my friends and going out and having fun and kind of forgetting about it because I never forget about it, but just being a normal 26, well, now 27 year old. But I think sometimes when there's like big planned events, I find that a lot harder. Like a wedding or, that sort of
Gotcha.
thing there's a pressure to be happy and to like keep going. Or like, I haven't really been out like with big groups much, I'd say, to like long events maybe, because I just sometimes I'm just like, no, like I feel really shit today. Like
Right.
it's not a gradual improvement. I think that's what I'd say as well to people is don't expect that each day you'll feel a little bit better and then just feel really bad on the big dates. Like it's so up and down, round circles. Like, yeah, I don't say that. I wouldn't say now that I feel 12 months of worth of better.
Gotcha. Right.
Like it still feels, yeah, a year I've learned is nothing. Like really is nothing.
And then in terms of those kind of like ups and downs and backs and forth of navigating grief, people often talk about like the 5 stages of grief.
Bullshit.
Interesting. Okay. And in what sense do you feel like it wasn't necessarily not necessarily a good framework for understanding not necessarily good a framework for understanding how it was for you?
So it's quite a like contentious like theory that is in the grief world, because I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and following like Instagram pages and
What sort of
communities.
podcasts and
So mostly ones that are very much dedicated to like young people that have experienced loss, often parent loss, but not always. But things, there's one called like the Grief Gang, the Dead Parent Club, If We Don't Laugh, We Cry, I think it's called. Yeah, and various sort of things like that. That it just makes you feel like you're not the only one, because obviously I haven't got luckily a lot of friends that have lost a parent. Like good, we shouldn't at our age, but it can then make you feel like, okay, no one really gets this. So it is kind of nice to have those things and those communities. And yeah, one of them called It's Time. It's a charity, and they offer various support for young people that lost parents. And I wrote a piece for them the other week. Well, I wrote it a few weeks ago, and it got published.
what was the piece called?
Well, it didn't really have a name. It was just
okay.
my story. Like,
ignore that question. Yeah.
It was just like you just like submit your story, basically. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. But it was just about kind of everything that I've talked about today, and kind of how I feel coming up to a year, and kind of how, yeah, it's been a year. Like I've survived a year, but how do I come to terms with that? There's another year and another year and another year, and he's, it's not like, oh, I've made it through the first year. I feel like there's a lot of pressure put on like making it through the first year.
Gotcha.
But it's like, yeah, it doesn't then end. He doesn't come back. And I think the 5 stages of grief thing, realised I've gone off on a tangent. It was originally a theory actually designed for people that were dying, people that have been diagnosed with terminal illness. It was designed to show the stages that person goes through in terms of accepting their death.
Interesting.
That's what the theory was originally. The framework was what that was done for, but it's kind of been adopted and twisted and changed, and suddenly become a 5 stages of grief. And like, it's not, you definitely don't neatly move through these phases. I guess, yeah, you do feel all those things, but you also feel a lot of other things, and not necessarily in any order.
Were there any emotions or feelings or kind of mental states that you experienced that you were like, how do I deal with this?
Yeah, I think I've been very angry.
Interesting.
And I think that's something that we don't tend to talk about that much. I feel especially like feminine rage in general is not really like, we're not meant to get, angry, but I'm really angry at the world and for the fact that this happened. And that's been really hard to deal with, because I wasn't really like an angry person before, I wouldn't say. But I just get furious and jealous of people that aren't in this situation. Yeah, which is not very nice, obviously.
how does that kind of manifest itself in your day-to-day experience? Like the moments when you would feel like that, does it come at random, or is it like intrusive thoughts, or do you just...
Yeah, I think I probably just like am aware that there's probably been times where things have happened to people I know that aren't like as bad as what happened to me, even though, you know, everyone has different things and it's not to take away from their experiences, but I really struggle to then have that like sympathy, empathy. So I'm worried that I'm like, oh, am I being a bit of a dick? But like, I just keep comparing everything to like, I know it's not a competition. Like, grief is not a competition, but like, it's really hard not to be like, yeah, but what happened to me was so much worse. I just feel like this is kind of why I did the writing thing as well. And I just want it to be heard. Like, I want to talk about him. Like, I want people to know about him. And I think that's the thing, is knowing that obviously I'm not married, I haven't got a partner, I haven't got kids. If I do have that in the future, he's never going to have met them, they're never going to have met him. And I think about my dad's dad, who died before I was born. I don't have any really knowledge of him. I don't feel like I know him. You know, I really don't. And I think partly that's generational. He was a bit older, and I think my dad and him certainly weren't as close as me and my dad are. But I don't feel like I know him at all. He's just a guy that died before I was born. And it absolutely kills me that my potential future kids might have the same perspective.
Yeah, that's tough.
On my dad, which is, yeah, like horrible. Yeah, it's really hard, because I just think he was such a good dad, and you know, one day he would have been a great granddad, I'm sure. And like, he was like a big kid himself. And yeah, it just feels so odd to me that he's not gonna physically feature in people's lives, people that might, you know, be the most important people to me in the future. Which is just, yeah, it's really hard to get my head around. I think partly because the three of us, me and my mum and my dad, we always were so close. So, you know, there'd never be a situation where they weren't in my life unless they'd died. So yeah, it's a tough one.
Very much so. Very much so. And then thinking about, some water. It's really well spoken, by the way. I like that. Obviously can't be saying that.
No, keep it in.
Fine.
Keep the compliments in.
Thinking about yourself in another 12, 24 months' time, what do you think that version of yourself, looking back now, how do you think they would advise or console you, or tell you to focus on?
Yeah. It's so hard because, like I say, this year has gone unbelievably fast. Like, I feel like I've blinked and we're here. And I think I thought at the time that in a year's time, I would maybe feel, I don't know, not better, not over it, but like processing it more. But I still don't feel like I've really processed it. So I hope, you know, in another year, 2 years, hopefully I will have, and kind of be able to be like, you know, it does get better again, like life does get better. And it won't always, obviously it'll always be there, but it won't be kind of the forefront of your mind and your life all the time. Who knows?
Gotcha. And then in terms of the forefront of your mind, what's on the horizon for you right now? You mentioned it at the very start of the podcast. What are you looking forward to most right now?
Taylor Swift.
And what's your go-to Taylor Swift shower song?
That's too hard. There's so many. I cannot pick. That's like picking a favorite child. I can't.
Which was easy in your parents' case, yeah.
Well, exactly. Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm so excited to go to the Eras tour, and it's been such a long wait. Yeah, and it's nearly here. It's 2 weeks today. 2 weeks today.
Nice.
I'm gonna cry a lot. So she's got one song that's about, I think it's about the death of her grandma, actually. It's about grief, so I'm going to sob to that.
What's it called?
Marjorie,
Marjorie.
which I think was the name of her grandma.
Gotcha.
So I'm going to cry a lot to that. And then there's loads that have just been my like angry crying at how shit men are songs. So I'm definitely there's gonna be a lot of crying. It'll be great.
Gotcha.
I'm very excited.
Cool. Okay. Really appreciate your time. I also think this is just like a hugely meaningful and touching subject that either people who are going through this right now or might go through it in the future. I think there's a lot of value in what you said. So yeah, really appreciate the openness.
Thanks.
Cool. Awesome. That was so good. That was so good.